what you find is we'll need to have a much longer course if we wanted to cover everything in Islamic economics. So what this really is, brothers and sisters, is to give you an introduction to the core parts of Islamic economics. And that's what I want to cover over these 5 weeks. So in front of you, brothers and sisters, is just the results of the survey I sent to you. And Jazakallah khair for all of you who completed this. It's really useful for me to know what your background is and how much knowledge you have of the subject, because that will really help in everything. Hopefully, I'm hoping you can all hear me clearly. If I speak too fast, brothers and sisters, just put a comment up. The chat section, brothers and sisters, I think the best way to do this is I've got a presentation which I will run through. And if during that time, if you have any questions, if you put that on the chat, then after the presentation, we can have an open Q&A session where you can raise your hand electronically and you can ask your questions and we can engage, inshallah. With this sort of subject, it's usually better if I hear from you, the questions you have, and we discuss that. So really, each of these 5 weeks, what I will do is do a shortish presentation on some of the key aspects of Islamic economics. And then we can have a Q&A and open discussion on how we will do it. So I've just seen there's some couple of questions already. In total, brothers and sisters, each session will last for around an hour to an hour and a half. I will present something probably for half an hour to 45 minutes. And then really after that, it's a Q&A. So I won't be presenting for the full hour. I think some of you are saying the sound's quite low. So just bear with me a second. Hopefully that's better. I'm using a mic, so that hopefully should help make a difference. Yeah, so I won't speak for the whole 1.5 hours. What I'll do is give enough time for a Q&A, inshallah. So this is, inshallah, what we'll cover in the 5 weeks. So today, we will talk about the economic system. What is the Islamic economic system? What is the system when you compare it to capitalism? And I'm comparing it with capitalism as I think that's a good way to make sense of how the Islamic economic system works. The next week, we'll have a look at ownership. Ownership, brothers and sisters, is a very central component of Islamic economics. So we will go through that next week, inshallah. Then we'll have a look at money and finance. Money and finance is a very important topic. It affects us all. And we'll have a look at what are the key components of the capitalist system and what Islam says about money and finance, inshallah. Then we will talk about tax, inshallah. In the 4th week, we'll talk about what Islam says about taxation. What are the Islamic taxes? What are the evidences for these? And then in the final week, brothers and sisters, I did ask you what you would like to cover. And it looks as though by far most of you want to talk about Islamic economics in the modern age. In fact, overwhelmingly, people voted for that. So we will do that, inshallah, in the last week. We will have a look at Islamic economics in the modern world, what that means, and the impact it has, inshallah. So I think that is all the house rules, inshallah. That's what we'll how we'll proceed. So if each of these sessions, brothers and sisters, I will present something, and during that, feel free to put your questions or any comments or any views you have on the chat. And then once I've presented, we can open it up. You can come on the mic, you can ask your questions or give your perspective, or we can go through it on the chat, inshallah. So today, brothers and sisters, I want to talk about what is economics. We want to talk about the basics of economics. And the key thing really to understand is both the Western term economics and the Islamic term for economics is iqtisad. These both come from the Greek term. It comes from the Greek term, which is called oikonomia, which actually means how to run a household. And this makes sense, but if you look at economics, it's about how to run an economy. And really, an economy is just a broader, if you're running a house, you've got your bills, you've got your income. Running an economy is just scaled up to a whole country. So both iqtisad and the Western term economics, they both come from the Greek term. So you find over time, taking care of the household became taking care of the whole of society. And this is why throughout history, brothers and sisters, there was no such thing as studying production, distribution, separate from the political system. In fact, for most of history, brothers and sisters, economics and politics was one subject. It was called political economy, because your politics has a big impact on your economy. It's really since the 1800s, which we'll have a look at, where economics, the study of production, distribution, became separate to politics. So if anybody's ever studied economics, it's a separate discipline now. You study microeconomics, you study macroeconomics, you study the things that affect the economy, you study the things that affect decision-making by individuals in the economy. That wasn't the case. Most of history, economics and politics was one thing. And a lot of this was due to liberal thinkers, which we will talk about later on, inshallah. So what is economics? Well, economics is understood to be the study of production, distribution, and the consumption of goods and services. If you think about it, in any economy, brothers and sisters, you have people. People need to fulfill their needs. So how you produce goods to fulfill those needs, how you distribute them, how you consume them, this is the study of economics. This is the generally accepted definition. And the economic system is what answers how to do this. I have my own definition, brothers and sisters, and my definition is people have needs, and how you fulfill these needs is what the economic system is all about. So people have needs, and these needs are fulfilled by utilizing the available resources. How you do this is the study of the economic system. So every individual is affected by the economic system they live under. So, if you live under a communist economic system, you have a certain way of life. If you live under a capitalist, liberal, free market economic system, that has an impact on people's lives. If you live under an Islamic economic system, the way of life will be very, very different. So economic systems are very important. They affect how you have wealth, what you can own, what you can't own. So really, to understand the Islamic economic system or any economic system, we have to answer these three questions. We have to answer, what are human needs? What are the needs we're trying to satisfy? We need to answer, what is the economic problem? And then we need to look at how the economic system addresses this. These are the three critical questions, brothers and sisters, in order to make sense of any economic system. So I think the best way to do this, brothers and sisters, is if we put this into a table and we compare and contrast how Islam and capitalism answer these questions and how they actually deal with them. So the first one is, what are human needs? And because Islam and capitalism are two different ways of life, their answers to this will be different as well. And this is natural. Your Aqidah and different Aqidas answer the main questions about life very differently. So the purpose of life, Islam has an answer, which is very different to Christianity, which is very different to capitalism and other ways of life. So when it comes to capitalism, brothers and sisters, it views human needs as largely material. And their view is that human needs are unlimited and they're constantly growing. So this is a classic view in Western economics, that human needs are completely unlimited. They constantly grow. So they say humans have needs and they have wants. So that's why you'll find, brothers and sisters, that the measurement of an economy, the most dominant measurement is GDP, gross domestic product. And this only measures material needs. It doesn't measure anything else. It measures how much is being produced. It measures how much is being spent. So when you have an earthquake, which is a bad event, the money spent on reconstruction, the money spent on materials, this adds to the economy, even though people have passed away. So happiness in capitalist economics is how much of your material needs are being fulfilled. That's how they define it. So the capitalist view of human needs is largely material. You do now have other schools of thought who believe there are other needs, spiritual needs, these sort of things. But the dominant school of thought in capitalism, when it comes to economics, is that the humans are largely material and they have unlimited wants, and their needs are largely material. Okay, so how does Islam view human needs? Now, Islam views that insan does have needs, but it makes a distinction. It makes a distinction between the basic needs and then the needs beyond that, the luxury needs. So I've got two hadith in front of you. So the first one, it defines human basic needs. It said the son of Adam has no better right than that he would have a house wherein he may live, a piece of clothing where he may hide his nakedness, and a piece of bread and some water. So food, clothing, shelter are the basic needs of humans. Beyond that, what you have is luxury needs. So Islam doesn't say man, women have unlimited needs. In fact, it actually says human needs are limited, but it divides them into two, into your luxury needs and your basic needs. So your luxury needs is what this second hadith addresses. That if the son of Adam had a valley of gold, he would want two valleys and nothing would fulfill his mouth except dust. Meaning that your luxury needs are unlimited. Yeah, these can be many. So although this hadith sounds negative, it's not being negative. It's just saying that your luxury needs are unlimited, right? So when it comes to human needs, brothers, what you find is capitalism, Islam have two different views. So in capitalism, they view human needs as unlimited, whilst in Islam, we view them as limited. They consist of the basic needs, food, clothing, shelter, and then beyond that, you have the luxury needs. So you find that both Islam and capitalism have two different views on the nature of the human being. So the second thing, brothers and sisters, we look at is what is the economic problem? And again, what you'll see here, brothers and sisters, is Islam and capitalism have two very different views. So what is the capitalist view on the economic problem? So I've got a chart here, which hopefully should show you. So the economic problem as far as capitalism is concerned is scarcity. That the needs of humankind are unlimited and they constantly grow, and we do not have sufficient resources in the world. So you can see, brothers and sisters, here the production line is going up, but it's steady. But the population line is going up and it exceeds production. And this view, it comes from Thomas Malthus, who was a 17th century economist and political thinker. And his view is, which is what the dominant view in capitalism is that human needs are unlimited and they're going to completely outstrip what we have in terms of production, material resources. So from there comes the view that we should just fulfill as many needs as we can. We can't fulfill all the needs of man, right? So this view is still very predominant in capitalist economics even today. You still see it today. There's too many people in the world. We're overpopulated. There's not enough oil, gas. You know, humankind will outstrip what we can physically do. So a lot of this is justified by this chart here, which is the human population. So for all of human history, brothers and sisters, up until 1800, the world it took the whole of human history until 1800 to get to 1 billion population. So I think humans have been on Earth for about 100,000, 150,000 years. It took the whole of human history to get to 1 billion people. But since 1800, brothers, sisters, that's 200-ish years, we've now got to about 8 billion. So really what you find is that the world population is basically growing by 1 billion every decade or so. So this is the argument they use. to say that human needs are unlimited, we're growing in size, and we will not be able to fulfill all the needs of the people. So in Islam, we look at it very differently. The economic problem is based on how we view humans. So we say humans have basic needs and they have the luxury needs. So the economic problem is, how do we fulfill the basic needs? And then how do we satisfy the luxury needs? Islam, we don't come from the perspective there's not enough in the world. We don't come from the perspective that there's too many people in the world. What we come from is you have two types of needs, your basic needs and your luxury needs. And the economic problem is, what's the best way to solve these? So if we put it in this table again, capitalist definition of the economic problem is scarcity, unlimited wants and desires, limited resources, whilst the Islamic perspective is how do we fulfill the basic needs and then the luxury needs. So naturally, the only way to do this, brothers and sisters, is your economic system needs to address this. And how Islam and capitalism address this differs very, very widely. Yeah. How do we fulfill the basic needs in Islam? How do you fulfill the luxury needs? And in capitalism, how do you fulfill the needs of people when there isn't sufficient resources to go in the world? And you find both systems address this very differently. So as the chart shows you, brothers and sisters, which I will run through, is that the Western economic system addresses this in a very simpler way. Their way of addressing this is through freedom of ownership and free trade and free markets. And what they're effectively saying, if you leave men and women to their own devices, they will come up with ways to best satisfy their needs. Now, there isn't enough resources in the world to fulfill the needs of all people. So through freedom to own whatever you want, through free trade and free markets, this is the best way for people to fulfill their needs. And I'll come up here, brothers and sisters, with 4 examples to illustrate this. So the first example, this is intellectual property. In the capitalist economic system, you can own anything. And I want to give you an example of this. Apple, the mobile phone company and laptop company, it took Samsung to court. And it took them Samsung to court over intellectual property. On your phones, brothers and sisters, you can make the screen bigger by using your fingers. You can make it smaller. This expression, Apple believes it invented and it owns. And because Samsung used it on their phone, they took them to court over it. So you can even own an expression in capitalist economics. And this is what intellectual property is for. Any idea you have, any process you have, any blueprint you have, anything intangible, you can own it. This is what freedom of ownership means. The second aspect you see of this is debt. Debt, brothers and sisters, I lend you money, you owe me that money, it's a loan. You pay me back in installments or you pay me back in a year, that is a debt. That debt is a product I can buy and sell it. I can sell it to somebody else and charge them a fee for it. So debt is a product. You know, we may view debt as I owe you money, I got to repay it to you. In capitalist economics, debt is a product. The term is they've consumerized it. So you find the banking industry, which we'll talk about, inshallah, in a couple of weeks, the financial markets, they're all about buying and selling debt. The next example, brothers and sisters, I live in the UK, I live in Europe, and in many parts of Europe, prostitution is legalized because they view prostitution as a supply of labor. A woman selling her body, this is her selling her labor. And with some restrictions, this is legal in most of Europe. So sometimes, for example, Holland, Netherlands, very famous, they have a red light district where everything's legal there in that area. So for them, the effect, the repercussions are irrelevant. It is a supply of labor, and a woman or a man to supply whatever labor they want because they have the freedom of ownership. And that's how prostitution is legal in most places. There are some restrictions in some countries, but generally the restrictions are the time and the place, these sort of things. And then the final example of freedom of ownership, brothers and sisters, is privatization. So water, gas, electricity, all these essential things you need and people need as a society, these can be owned by individuals. You can own the water that people need to survive. Water, brothers and sisters, is a basic building block of life. Everybody needs it. This can be privately owned. In fact, in most of the world, these are owned by private companies. So the way the capitalists address their economic problem, and their economic problem is how do you satisfy the needs, the unlimited needs of people, is through freedom of ownership and free trade and free markets. Leave people to their devices and they will come up with ways to fulfill their needs. And as a result of that, there's 4 examples I've given you there. So how does the Islamic system deal with this? Well, the Islamic system, there's a couple of things we need to keep in mind. Firstly, Islam actually makes a distinction, brothers and sisters, between economic science and economic system. Now, what is economic science? Islam just makes a distinction between owning things and how you grow things you own. So you've got wealth. How you grow that wealth, how you invest it, that's a science discussion. What are you allowed to own? What are you not allowed to own? That's a system discussion. That's a halal haram discussion. So technology, techniques to increase production, techniques to make your harvest really, really good, techniques to make your production line more and more efficient. These are all discussions of economic science, and all of these are permissible. This is not what the Islamic system addresses. What the Islamic system addresses, brothers, is wealth circulation. And wealth circulation is about what are you allowed to own and what are you not allowed to own. So Islam solves the economic problem through a system of ownership and disposal of ownership. And this, brothers and sisters, will be the main discussion next week, inshallah. What are the details of this? Right? Also, brothers and sisters, Islam recognizes you as an individual, but it also recognizes society as a whole. So in the liberal system, brothers and sisters, it's all about the individual. Are you allowed to own? Are you not allowed to own? And I'll give you an example, brothers and sisters. The COVID vaccine was made by a handful of corporations around the world. And they sold this at huge prices to governments. Now, most governments never publicly stated how much these are costing. But because this was desperately needed to solve the COVID crisis, these companies could charge whatever they want because their individual right comes before society. In Islam, the halal can become haram if it affects the whole of society. So although you're allowed to own something individually, if it harms the rest of society, if it's a problem for the rest of society, Islam comes down upon that. So for us, society comes before the individual. Whilst in the capitalist economic system, brothers and sisters, the individual comes before the whole of society. So if we fill in this table, inshallah, brothers, you will see, brothers and sisters, the Western economic system, it addresses the economic problem through freedom of ownership. So free markets and freedom of ownership allows people to achieve and pursue their own interests. The Islamic economic system, it addresses the economic problem through a system of private and public ownership. And that's how we distribute wealth. So the Islamic economic system, brothers and sisters, if you were to ask me to define it, it is these 3 things. It is about ownership, it's about the disposal of ownership, and it's about distribution of wealth amongst the people. This is, brothers and sisters, at a high level, what the Islamic economic system is all about. Right? So inshallah, brothers and sisters, next week, we will cover in detail Islam and ownership, what Islam says, inshallah. So that's everything I wanted to say, brothers and sisters. There's obviously a lot there. So feel free now for your questions, inshallah. Feel free to make any comments, inshallah. You've got 2 options. You can either put a comment on the chat and I can take your question, inshallah. Or if you want, you can raise your hand and you can come, inshallah, onto the mic and ask your questions as well, inshallah. Feel free, brothers. There's no such thing as a silly question. Economics can be a very complex subject, so feel free to ask what you want, what's on your mind, and inshallah, we'll try and address as many as we can, inshallah. So if you use the raise your hand, you can raise your hand in the on your participation bit, and then I'll give you the mic, inshallah. Any question? I'm just having a look, see if there's already any questions. Just bear me. So just got a quick question here about conventional mortgage. We will cover this in the money and finance section. I'm sure people have got a lot of questions, especially I think there's a lot of you from the West, so this is a common question. We will discuss this, inshallah, in a couple of weeks in the money and finance section. We'll talk about mortgages. I mean, I don't plan to give any fatwas, brothers. What I plan to do is give you the framework, give you the Islamic position, and then we can discuss more, inshallah, yeah?
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Adnan. We have a hand raised from Siraj al-Mateen. Inshallah, we'll unmute him.
Okay, yes, Siraj al-Mateen, go for it, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khair for your presentation. I just have a question. So basically, what are you being saying that there is a fundamental difference between Islamic economic system and between the present economic system, right? But yeah. I've been myself a business student for quite a long time, but I never knew this, yeah, or never heard of it, or in the present education system, it's never been taught to us, right? I grew up in Bangladesh, yeah, and I never heard of this, honestly. So I just wanted to know that what's the reason behind it, why it's been hidden, or why is that there's alternative, and a lot of people don't know nothing about it. Yeah. That's
Yeah, that's a very valid question. I mean, to be honest with you, brother, I studied international business and economics at university. My background is economics, and really, I mean, I was at university late 90s, early 2000s. It was really only the mid 2000s where I come across Islamic economics. I'd heard of zakat, I'd heard of charity, I'd heard of waqf, some of these Islamic financial economic concepts. I'd never come across actual framework, and I think there's a couple of reasons for this. Firstly, if you look at the Muslim lands, obviously, our lands are not independent. None of our countries apply the Islamic economic system. So as a result, none of these are taught in education institutions. So most people grow up not knowing the framework and what Islam says. They may hear of individual rules. They may hear of zakat and charity and things like this. I think the main thing, brother, is the capitalist system is so dominant. I mean, for a few decades, we had competition from the communist system. I'm in Europe, so there's many lefties, there's many lefty groups. France and Germany are considered, semi-socialist systems, very big public sectors. But if you look, the amount of wealth we have in the world, the amount of progress, all of this is credited to the capitalist economic system. So it's very difficult for any other system to compete with the capitalist system when the capitalist system is so dominant and it's been so successful, according to their definition. So when you propose any other economic system, the natural question would be, where's your example? So if you look at the history of the West, brothers and sisters, for all of human history, up until 1600, they were at war with each other. They were living in poverty. They were under the authority of the church. Then, they went through Enlightenment. They went through Renaissance. They went through the Industrial Revolution. And they went through massive scientific development. They developed their economies. They developed weapons of war. There is today, brothers and sisters, more wealth in the world than there's ever been in human history. There's been more scientific and technological development in the last 100 years than the whole of human history put together. So because the capitalist system is so dominant, what unfortunately many Muslims do is they just look at Islam and where are there similar economic concepts in Islam to capitalism. So you find, oh yeah, we have ownership in Islam. Yes, we have markets in Islam. Yes, you can set up a business in Islam. but Islam has its own framework. And because we don't really have any country in the world that implements the Islamic economic system, we may have countries that implement bits and bobs, but we don't have anyone that implements the whole of Islam. There is no model or there is no blueprint to present to everybody. So these are the two main reasons why. I mean, in the West, there's a big popularity of Islamic finance, and that's made people interested in Islamic economics. I actually know someone, brother. I actually know a sister from Mexico. She became Muslim. She converted, but she came across the Islamic finance site. She just couldn't believe a religion said something about economics. So she, as she read more, she converted to Islam. So that, you know, that's the impact Islamic economics has. But the capitalist system is so dominant, it's crowded out every other idea on economics. I mean, even the left, even communists, socialists are unable to really dominate this particular area. So I've got a couple of questions here on the chat, which I'll take, inshallah. Okay, so we've got a question here. Assalamu alaikum. While I agree that the capitalist mindset does imply purely private ownership and minimal state, to what extent is this actually the case in modern societies? For example, would you say that the consideration of private public ownership is still present in Western societies as they're not fully capitalist? So I live in Europe, I live in the UK, brothers and sisters, and you're right. What you find is, although there are free markets, you find significant state ownership. So France and Germany, there are significant state ownership in the economy. And a lot of this is actually political. So the direction they say they want to go is where everything becomes private. That is the direction they're heading to. Some countries are doing this much faster than other countries. But I would say, because of, you've had a number of crises in the West. You've had the economic crisis 2008. You've got now the cost of living crisis. This is leading to a lot more questioning. It's leading to a lot more questioning of Islamic Western economic principles. So privatization for a long time was a good thing. Now people are questioning that. Now people say, is it really? Look at the problem it's actually caused. So I think the implicit thing in the question is that capitalist economics isn't purely about ownership and minimal state ownership. It is still there. When you study economics, the only thing they teach you is everything should be privatized over time. They believe that public ownership should be a temporary thing. This distorts the market. And really, the ideal place to be is private ownership runs supreme. Yeah, that's the view they have, inshallah. We've got can people own natural resources? I think we will talk about this next week in more detail. They can in Islam, but there's some details. We make a distinction between what we call public property and private property. A public property, private property, and state property. Public properties are those which are necessary for the community to exist as a community. So these resources cannot be owned, but everybody needs them. Resources of large, uncountable amounts, these can't be owned by individuals. Others can. But we will go more detail, inshallah, next week on this. We've got another question. What's the Islamic perspective on intellectual property? Can you own ideas and things like digital art and media? So Islamically, again, we'll go into a bit more detail next week on this as well. But at a high level, at a basic fundamental level, you know, ownership in Islam, it usually is something tangible, or it's a benefit or a service. So you find ideas, although they exist in your head, they don't have a tangible reality. So if you produce something like a piece of software, you put a brand logo on there that identifies it, that has a tangible reality. So yes, you can own digital media art, yeah, as long as there's something that identifies it as yours. You can't really own ideas because ideas are intangible. Once you've turned them into something tangible, even if it exists in the digital world, then you could say it's something that can be physically owned. But again, we'll go into a bit more detail, inshallah, next week's on that. Then we've got here, what is the difference between political economy and the word economy we hear on the media? We do not hear political economy quite often. They become, I mean, in the media now, political economy and the economy usually mean the same thing. historically, when you say economy or economics, you're not talking about politics. You're talking about production, distribution, inflation, unemployment, these sort of things. Political economy is the system that implements it. So to give an example, should healthcare be free or should people have to pay? Now, that isn't purely an economic question. That's a political economy question. Why political economy? Because your view on the politics defines that. If you believe in private ownership, if you believe the government shouldn't provide anything, you're a free marketeer. So your politics affects your economy there. So today, though, mostly when you hear in the media economy, political economy, they're talking about the same thing, really. Really, political economy was a term up until 1800 because political economy was different to economics. Now, many people don't separate economics from politics. It's the same thing, really, right? Which is true in a way. You can't separate politics from economy. How do you run your economy depends on your viewpoint in life. So your political views will impact your economy. You can't really separate them. So again, we can talk about this more next week, inshallah, as we go into more detail. I've got another question here. Why are books in Islamic economics not so common? The reason why is nobody studies Islamic economics as a political economy. When people study Islamic economics, they just look at a few concepts, usually from the perspective of capitalist economics. So they look at zakat, they look at charity, they look at these sort of things. So what you find is there are some books people have written on Islamic economics, and these are people that worked in the financial industry in the West. They saw the corruption of capitalist economic system, so then they started looking at other systems. So that's the main reason why. And also, Islamic economics isn't very dominant. So you'll find Islamic finance, for example, a lot of it really is Western capitalist products which have tried to make halal. So this creates a big problem. These products are not really built upon the Islamic basis. So that's why there's not really too much to talk about when you talk about. There's not too much to talk about when it comes to Islamic economics when you view it from a capitalist perspective. When you look at Islamic economics from its own foundations, when you look at Islamic economics and how it will run an economy, then there's actually a lot to talk about. So it says here, Salam, will you be pointing out the delete from the Quran and Hadith for the ruling regarding economic system? I can, so we'll do this next week, inshallah. We'll go into each of the things we'll go through. I'll point out the evidences as well. What I've tried to do here, brothers and sisters, is I've not put in a lot of the dalil because the dalil can actually take a long time to get through. However, inshallah, we can go through them. If you've got any questions, I can give you the dalil as well. What I've tried to focus on is give you the high-level framework, how to look at Islamic economics, but we can cover the dalil as well. That's not a problem. So I gave you a couple of hadith there about basic needs. Next week onwards, we'll go through a lot more dalil because when you're looking at ownership, what's halal, what's haram, that's based on dalil. Okay, we got another question here. Sorry for the blunt question, but the usual resistance against the Islamic economic system amongst the wealthy Muslims is that the current capitalist system has the ability to create millionaires. Does the Islamic system create such wealth for individuals? This has to do with the mindset that has been created by capitalism. Look, the capitalist economic system we went through now, brothers and sisters, their view on human needs are your needs are unlimited. And the way you fulfill those needs is by doing whatever's necessary, by buying, selling, investing, whatever you want. And life's purpose is to acquire as much wealth as you can because that's what happiness is. So that's why it's natural, brothers and sisters, there will be more wealth, there'll be more millionaires because that is what life's objective is. The Islamic economic system, the purpose is very different. This life is temporary for us. We believe that your wealth will be used against you in the hereafter. Yeah, because this life is temporary, the soul life isn't about making lots of money. Now, Islam isn't against you being wealthy. Many of the Sahaba were very rich. Many were also not very rich as well. So Islam isn't against millionaires. It's not against that. In fact, if you're a millionaire, what are you doing with that wealth? You're going to be held more accountable. So yeah, Islam isn't against this. So we had Abdurrahman bin Auf, he used to travel with his wealth and people used to think there was a sandstorm coming. That's how wealthy Islam isn't necessarily against it. Obviously, capitalism, it likes to take credit that capitalism inherently creates millionaires. Yeah, but I think the reality points the other way now. What you find is capitalism it creates a few millionaires, whilst the vast majority are trying to make ends meet. The vast majority of people are not millionaires in the world. The vast majority of people in the West are not even millionaires. In fact, you find the 1% are very, very rich, whilst the vast majority are trying to make ends meet. So what capitalism is very successful is creating a few extremely rich people. What it's not good at, which they accept here, is how it distributes its wealth. It can't distribute it in an equal or in any equitable way, inshallah. We've got another question. I'm curious whether we will talk about the role of waqfs in the Islamic economic system. Is this an important part of wealth circulation, or our most important mechanism which are utilized? So we will cover this a little bit, inshallah, I think in the money and finance section. Look, there is more to the Islamic economic system than waqf. Again, zakat, waqf, these things come up all the time. This is all people understand to be Islamic economic. There's way more. Islam has a view towards currency. Islam has a view on how to distribute wealth. These are way more important. And these, inshallah, we will touch on as well as we go through the course. Can you suggest some basic reading on Islamic economics and ideas? Inshallah, I will actually draw up a list of books to understand the capitalist system and the Islamic economic system, which I'll put on the WhatsApp group, inshallah. Okay, political economy mixes both policy and economics, so it's a study of effects of policies on economics and society in general. Question to you, Sheikh, is there a study of political economy of Islam? There isn't at the moment. No one's done that, and there's probably a reason for that. The reason why it probably is because there isn't a country that applies the Islamic economic system. You know, Turkey, Saudi, Pakistan, Malaysia, they may have bits and bobs of Islam, but they do not apply the whole Islamic economic system. So nobody studies the economic system of Islam. Nobody studies how it actually physically works. So there isn't actually out there. But what I'll do is I will send you a reading list anyway, inshallah, of books that are good, that explain the Western system, and also different books that have been written on the Islamic economic system, inshallah. We've got here, why wasn't the well in Medina nationalized initially when Hazrat Usman acquired it and gave it as sadaqah? I'm not sure, brother, I'll have to check that. The Medina in well, I'm not sure which one you're talking about. The Medina, you're talking about the actual, oh, I know what you're talking about. I'll have to check that. I'm not sure on the top of my head. Yeah, I'll come back to that next week, inshallah. While capitalism is dominant, why hasn't boom and bust within the system not create real class within the West? And that's a good question. If you're as old as me, you know, if you're in your 40s, we've gone from 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, communism collapsed, capitalism is the best system for mankind. It is the end of history, it's the end of development of ideas. Capitalism won. After 20 years, they're not saying that anymore. Now they're saying, despite all the problems, there is nothing else. Capitalism, the best we've got. So there's a recognition that capitalist economic system has got problems. There's actually a recognition on that. I feel the reason why people still follow it at the moment is because what's the alternative? Where is the alternative? The communist system is dead. There is no country that implements another alternative system. So until an alternative system arises, people will continue with capitalism because there is nothing else. And that's why, despite all the problems, wealth misdistribution, the poverty, boom and bust, key strategic assets being owned by a few people, people put up with it because what other system is there? So you find the academics justify the capitalist system by saying it's the best we've got. Without it, you know, there'll be nothing for you. Whilst most people can see there's many problems. But what's the alternative? Because in the Muslim world, they're not applying the Islamic economic system. They're not promoting the Islamic economic system. So that's really the main challenge you've got there. Got another question here. What is the philosophical background of capitalism in defining the needs of people. The philosophical background to capitalism, brothers and sisters, all comes from the Enlightenment era. It comes from the era of what happened in Europe, where the church was the dominant institution, and it said many, many things and imposed it which contradicted people's lives. So that's why when they went through the Enlightenment, they challenged the teachings of the church. The thinkers, the philosophers, some of the elites, they challenged it. They challenged its views on science. And as a result, what they come up with secularism, which is God, the Christian church, should have no say in how we live our life. So by getting rid of God, they've come up with their own understandings. And really, for most of history, their view is, man's needs, he or she wants everything. That's what's actually necessary. So the reason why they defy human needs is because that's how they view the human. They view the human as purely material. Yeah, he has material needs. So if his material needs are being fulfilled, he's happy. That's what happiness is. Now, there is some pushback against this now, but I would still say overwhelmingly, most people's views are that people's needs are material. So the more you own, the more wealth you have, the more needs you can fulfill, and that will make you happy. So obviously, it does contradict man's nature, but many things in capitalism contradict man's nature. Yeah, your viewpoint towards life is what colors everything. So, got another question. Saad, you just mentioned that no one studied political economy because it's nowhere implemented. I agree, but didn't political economy study begin regarding the years in which the Islamic system was there, or didn't the Muslims implement the study of political economy correctly during this time? So, I assume the question was, why are people not studying political economy today? Right. So today, because the capitalist system is so dominant, obviously during Islamic history, people studied Islamic economics. People developed the field of Islamic economics. The scholars, they expanded on the subject matter itself. So yes, historically they did. In the modern day, the capitalist system is so dominant, that's all anybody studies. Okay, interesting question to add. What are some seminal works focusing on Islamic economics in the Sharia? I'm aware of Al-Kharaj by Imam Abu Yusuf and Hanafi, but others I'm ignorant of. So there's not too much work in Islamic history, and there's a couple of reasons for this. Because we had Islamic systems in the past, the rulers implemented Islamic economics. So it was practically there for people. So there was no need to write about it because it was being implemented. The Kitab al-Kharaj was actually written by Imam Abu Yusuf because if I remember, the Abbasid Khalif, he wanted a manual on the different taxes. Right? Ibn Khaldun wrote a whole book, and in there he talks about some economic principles as well. Keep in mind, brothers and sisters, up until the industrial era, economics was largely based on agriculture. In fact, the Islamic economic system was revealed when the world economy was largely based on agriculture. That's why you find Islam says a lot about land taxes. It says a lot about produce. It says a lot about land ownership. That was the era the Islamic economics came in. So yes, historically, there are a lot of literature. But what you find is because the system was being implemented, many scholars didn't find a need to write about it because it was there in front of them. If it wasn't there, then they would look at what the Islamic economic system is. And what you find, a lot of the Islamic economic system, you've got the ayahs in the Quran, a lot of it comes from what the Prophet ﷺ did, and then a lot of it comes from the Khilaf al-Rash, the era, the example of the Sahaba itself. So how you treat land, how you distribute wealth, how you intervene in the economy, these sort of things. So another question, how would the Islamic system work on the world stage if it has to interact with the capitalist economic system? So that is a very good question for our final week, Islam in the modern world. Look, any system can operate with other systems, yeah? Because the Islamic economic system, I mean, probably a good example is the Cold War. You had the communist system and you had the capitalist system. The capitalist system was implemented in countries that were part of the West, largely. And the communist system was all the communist countries. And it was a closed system. And obviously, communist countries did trade with non-communist countries. So, you know, if Islamic economics was being applied in Saudi, you can buy and sell to non-Muslims. You can buy and sell to non-Islamic economies. The system, you know, I can go into a shop and I can buy and sell with a non-Muslim. So in an Islamic economy, we can buy and sell with non-Islamic countries. Yeah, we agree a price, we agree the products, and we can sell them. So you can interact. That's actually possible. What systems do is they want to establish it for the whole world. So obviously at the moment, the capitalist system is the dominant system for the whole world. It's applied all over the world. So, you know, free markets, open up your economies, free trade, get rid of tariffs, get rid of any obstacles. That's how these actually work. But this is something we touch on in the final week, inshallah. You know, Islam in the modern age. How would it actually work? Okay, we've got another question. What does the Islamic economic system say about land ownership? As from my view, this will be very important. As, for example, the capitalist system is underpinned, at least in part, property rights. So we will talk about this next week, inshallah. Islam has detailed rules on land ownership. In fact, Islam was revealed in the agricultural era. So a large chunk of ownership in Islam are the rules regarding land. How do you acquire land? What are the rules on land? What are the different types of contracts you can have on land? Islam actually has many, many detailed rules on this. And this is actually something that has been studied by non-Muslims as well. So we will go through this in more detail next week, inshallah. There's a lot more there, but definitely you can own land in Islam. In fact, if land is unused and 3 years pass by, you can take over that land. Islam promotes the utilization of land rather than land just sitting there doing nothing. And many Islamic taxes are on land as well. So if you own land and you don't do anything with it, you still have to pay taxes on it. Islam promotes the use of land. So we'll go through this in a bit more detail next week, inshallah. So that's all the questions on the chat, inshallah. Any more questions or any comments? Anybody want to come on the mic? Feel free. Now's the time to ask all your questions. But what I try to do here, brothers and sisters, just give you an overview of the system, how the system really looks at the human needs, how it looks at the economic problem, and its framework on how to solve the economic problem. And so that shows that Islam has a framework. So zakat is built upon the Islamic economic system. Ownership is based on the Islamic economic system. You know, Islamic economics isn't we just pick and choose from other systems. We have our own foundations, we have our own principles, and all the rules which we'll talk about in the next few weeks are based upon what we discussed today, the Islamic economic system. So I'll just give a couple more minutes if anybody wants to put any more questions or comments on the chat. Feel free, brothers and sisters, anybody that wants to come on the mic, if you want to make a comment or ask a question. So I'll just give it a minute or two, and then inshallah we can call it a day if there's nothing, inshallah. We just got a quick one. Can you recommend some books which describe the development and implementation of capitalism? Yeah, so what I'll do, I'll draw up a book list, brothers and sisters, which you can, you know, use even once the course is finished. And I'll cover everything, the development of capitalism, the key parts of capitalism, some of the different books. You know, alhamdulillah, since 2008, the financial crisis that happened in the world, a lot more material has been written on economics generally. There's a lot more views on economics, what's the problem with capital, and all of these are very important. They're good insight into economics. Okay, got another question. Is there a concept like pensions, like we have in Western societies? Yes, we do have a concept of pensions. It has its own rules. We can touch on that, inshallah. Look, a pension really, at a very basic level, is people put money into a pot, and then when you retire, you get income from that pot. And what you find in the world, you got government pensions, you've got private pensions, you've got pensions with companies, you've got pensions from the financial markets, That's just a more grand version. At a very basic level, a pension is we put money in a pot and then we take money out of the pot as we retire. So there is something like that in Islam. In fact, Umar ibn Khattab, he did that. He gave a pension to people based on how long they'd been Muslim and when they get old. And we can have a look at that, inshallah. Got another question here. Do you think that the recent skepticism of capitalism system paves the path for the import of Islamic view in dictating private public debate in West society? I think it does, actually. I think that's a very good point, actually. People are looking for alternatives. Look, the best argument they've got for capitalism is there's nothing else. They're not even arguing what are the benefits of capitalist economics. They're just saying there is nothing else. It's the best we've got. So that is pushing people. I've given a few talks, brothers and sisters, in the UK on Islamic economics to non-Muslims, and their eyes light up. They just can't believe there's another view. They can't believe Islam has a view on Islamic economics. And actually, brothers and sisters, many people's hearts open to Islam when they hear what Islam says about the economy. You know, if you talk about politics, you know, you're oppressive, you're too dictatorial. If you talk about the Islamic social system, you oppress women. There's already preconceived ideas. When you talk about Islamic economics, they don't know anything, so their eyes light up. They're interested in what Islam has to say. And because their economics has got so many issues, they are open to other ideas. So you're absolutely right. I think the skepticism actually is a point of dawah for us to engage with non-Muslims on how Islam deals with some of the economic problems, and more importantly, what Islam even says about the economy. Even Muslims don't really know that. So no, your point's absolutely spot on, actually. The skepticism really is a path for the dawah into Islamic economics. We've got here maybe also dalil for the main arguments. Yes, I will do that, inshallah. I will put that in, inshallah. What I will do, brothers, is I will send you the slides as well, inshallah, so you got that as well. And what I'll do is when I send you the slides, I'll put in the dalil for these as well. I didn't put too much dalil in because we're looking at the framework. As we go on, there will be more dalil, inshallah. Okay, okay, I think there doesn't seem to be any more questions or comments, inshallah. Can't see anyone's hand up. So I think we'd call it a day there. I think, you know, economics can be quite a lot to take in. So it's probably good we have a few sessions, but not too long. But what I'll do, brothers and sisters, I will send you another survey. Again, it just helps me to know what you like, what you don't like, what you would prefer. And so I can prepare these presentations more in line with what you want. So I'll send you another survey, just how you found today, what you like, what you didn't like, what can be improved, and what you'd like to see. And that will help me, inshallah. But we'll call it a day there, inshallah. Yeah, we can communicate on the group, inshallah. Otherwise, I will see you same time next week, inshallah. وقولوا قولي هذا وأستغفر الله والحمد لله رب العالمين.